Here's a question I want to get an answer to, and I've been asking this for a couple of days. I'm hoping our next guest will. It is, have an answer that is, why is it we are rolling out 90 plus today in the city of Ottawa, which is ahead of the provincial numbers, by the way, because the portal doesn't get launched till the 15th. Meanwhile, relatives of mine in the province of Quebec, in Montreal specifically, they got their appointments to get a vaccine for March 22nd, and they're 65. Dr. Raywat Deonandan, epidemiologist, science communicator at the University of Ottawa. Am I wrong here? Could we expect that kind of discrepancy as we roll this out? It just seems to me 65 in Montreal in 2 weeks, they'll have their shot in less than that, whereas who knows when 65 will get it here.
You know, I love talking to you because I never know what you're going to ask me. It's always a bit shocking. It's one of the issues in the vaccine rollout nationally is the heterogeneity across the country.
Wow, wait. What's that word?
Heterogeneity, the differences in the ways is done around the country.
And I love talking to you because you always teach me new words, Doctor.
So people get their news from national news often, or social media, and they're listening to people from BC and from Nova Scotia and wondering, does that apply here? It's confusing, especially when other countries tend to have a more consistent approach across the country. So what does it mean? I don't really know what it means, except it's possible that Quebec is using their AstraZeneca doses differently than we are, for example. And that's definitely true across the country. Different provinces use it differently. Okay. As we know, NASTY has told us to only use it for those under 65, but Quebec has decided that it's fine for those over 65 for a variety of defensible reasons. So it may be that they are just advertising that demographic for that vaccine right now. And also might mean they have a different strategy. There are different ways of looking at the vaccine rollout strategy. Everyone agrees it must be done by risk, but there are different ways of measuring risk. There's a risk of exposure, risk of infection, risk of death. Those who have high risk of death, the elderly. Those who have high risk of infection, healthcare workers. And those who have high risk of exposure are people like teachers and grocery clerks and bus drivers. So depending upon how you think about this, that will dictate how you roll out the vaccines.
It's also important to note that we've had more people vaccinated with both doses than any province here in the province of Ontario, which begs the question, because Quebec decided not to hold back any shots, get everybody as much as they could vaccinated and worry about the supply later. And it was a bit of a gamble, but it seems to me it's paying off. Saving lives.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. It was the right move, which is why I support this 4-month delay, even though it's not, let's face it, it's not evidence-based in the sense that we have strong evidence to say it'll work. But what it does, it gets more shots into more arms, and we have faith that the supply chain will backfill doses when we need them. Because, look, we're up against it now. We have to increase population immunity before new variants take hold, and that way we keep society open.
Okay, let's talk about this blood clot. One batch of AstraZeneca, we're being told by Health Canada our supply is safe. What do you say?
Yeah, it's totally safe. Look, I don't want to say these things happen, because these things don't really happen. It's just that let's not amplify a bad message beyond all measure. What we have here is a vaccine that's been deployed to millions of people around the world, millions, if not tens of millions. And it's perfectly safe, it seems, for the most part. There are going to be a couple of hiccups here and there, not to call blood clots and serious diseases hiccups, but that's what they are. It's unclear if these events are actually causally linked to the vaccine. That's why they're being precautious. Is that a word, precautious? They're being cautious, and they are holding back that batch while they investigate. It might be entirely true that they're not related at all. And it is a batch thing. It's not a vaccine thing. That's right. Important. So, and we in Canada, as you noted, get our AstraZeneca doses from India, from the Serum Institute, and the ones in Denmark are coming from European manufacturers. So it's different. It's like getting a bad case of Coca-Cola with a little more dire, consequences.
Although the Mexican Coke has sugar in it, it's sugar cane. It's much better.
There is that. Indian Coke as well, yeah. No argument here. Yeah. So let's not panic about. If AstraZeneca were offered to me tomorrow, I would take it in my eyeball. That's how eager I am to get that vaccine.
I get it. No, me too. And I'm bring it on. And if you're going to throw, if 7 countries are saying let's put it on hold, bring the supply over here. I don't think it works that way, but it'd be nice if we had a bonus.
Let's not bring that batch.
That's true. That's true. Well said. Well said. That's why you're the epidemiologist that I'm not. Speaking of what, you've done 3,000 plus interviews. What is the dumbest question you've got?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay, the smartest then. We'll focus on the positive.
That's a tough question. I mean, I get a lot of smart questions from journalists. Not to, compliment you too much, but I'm surprised all the time. People ask questions like, "What does this mean for this population? How do we unroll this therapy? Break down the randomized controlled data this way or that way?" And some people have done their due diligence and have looked at the numbers quite closely, more closely than I have, sometimes. So I'm very impressed by the evolution of journalism in the wake of this crisis. How deeply invested people have become in understanding the details. But you get some dumb questions like, can the vaccine give me COVID? Well, I think we solved that question decades ago with the flu vaccine.
That being said, though, I think there are people out there who were afraid, right? And so you've got to ask it because there's hesitancy that remains to this day. Absolutely.
I don't mean to disrespect people with that question. It's just, it's
I get it.
Not what I expected.
Yeah.
And when I started this endeavor,
both apply.
Right. I was a little shocked by how basic the questions were. I was skewing myself for very complicated things that I wasn't qualified to answer. But in fact, they're quite basic. And I'm pleased that I'm able to fill that gap, but discouraged that our science literacy is so poor across the board. So this is a wake-up call to reinvest in science literacy across the population.
Well, here's the thing. It's funny you should say that because as we know, we stopped producing them. And science is not what it should be in the education system. If we had politicians who knew more about science when they graduated, because there are people too, we forget that, maybe we wouldn't have let the whole scientific community down.
I think that is true 100%. Look at the countries, again, that have done well. You talked about Bhutan last time.
Yeah.
Bhutan is led by scientists. Their prime minister, their minister of everything.
Okay, let's not get crazy here. Raywat Deonandan for prime minister. What do you think?
Oh, no. You look at Germany, like their public health people led the response, and their chancellor, Angela Merkel, is a scientist herself.
Right.
So that was useful.
She was there 18 years. She just stepped down.
Yeah.
I mean, was she? Did you think that was part of the? Obviously, she was well-rounded and not just a drama teacher or whatever else.
Well, I'm biased towards a scientist. But even scientists are human and we have flaws, believe it or not, and blind spots in our thinking and biases. So it's not perfect. But when you're facing a scientific crisis, it's useful to have that expertise at the top. If you're facing an economic crisis, it's useful to have an economist at the top.
Well, that's why we have roundtables of smart scientists like yourself who advising the politicians who may have a business background who can just, read a prompter.
Well, yes, no comment.
No comment. That's right. Said the guy who reads the prompter every morning. But Dr. Ray, how old's your little one now?
He's 10 months.
Now, are you optimistic for the future for your son growing up, or are you one of those who says we still don't get it? And when I say that, I'm not just talking about pandemics.
Right. I waffle back and forth. I'm an optimist by nature. And I look at the long view in 10,000 years of human civilization. Like we're going to have, waxes and wanings in the quality of civilization. We're in a dark period right now, believe it or not. But I think it's going to get better because I see positive things around the world. We can look locally and see how we're failing, economically and intellectually in some ways. But on the whole, the human species seem to be the curve is bending towards progress, I feel. The big challenge is right now climate change. And I think we're waking up to the fact that this requires a species-level response. And given how we respond to the pandemic and we saw the failures in our system, I have to be optimistic that we can address those failings for the next big crisis, which, of course, is climate change.
Yeah. And I would imagine if you were to put out the polls as they do, where does science rank in the top 10? It's probably moved up a notch or two, or maybe 5 or 10 in the last year.
Really? I hope you're right, because I got so much abuse that I'm also sure you're right.
Really? What do you mean by that, abuse?
Oh, we get a lot of hate mail, a lot of things like that. So
now, is it all pandemic related, or did you have that issue before?
Well, not really. Okay. Well, anytime I was in the media, you get some people, some yahoos with some comment. Yeah. But now with the pandemic, it's affecting people's lives, obviously. And you're looking, if you don't like the public health response and you don't know what else to do, then the logical next intellectual step is to assume there is no crisis to respond to. That's the only way you can reason your way through this.
There are some of your colleagues in the United States, some in academia, who still don't admit there's a pandemic. They say it's all conspiracy.
Yes, and this is the nature of a wide enough population. Everything falls along the bell curve. You're going to have some outliers. So you have to look at what the majority think. The majority is usually correct. on these matters.
Yeah.
I don't want to disrespect the outlier thinkers because we can always learn from,
Critical
fringe
mind.
thinking.
Yeah, always.
But,
It keeps you in check, right? Like a strong opposition in government.
Right, but when there's a crisis at hand and when the fringe thinking might get people killed, it's important to push
Yeah,
back.
well said. Well said on that note. That's the most important things we take away. Get the vaccine as soon as you can when you become eligible. Hey, Dr. Ray, I follow you, as you know, on Twitter. Is there a vegan cookbook in your future?
Maybe cookbooks don't sell. Yeah, leverage my name recognition now to make the money out of it possible.
Well, no, at least share the vegan movement is what I'm thinking. You could become an advocate.
I could be, but again, advocacy leads towards religiosity and dogmatism, and I don't want to push my lifestyle on people. But if you want to hear about my recipes, I'm willing to talk about them.
All right. Well, post-pandemic, we'll have you back, okay? And you can make something with legumes for me.
Deal.
It's always a pleasure. All kidding aside, when I put humor in it, it means that we've turned a corner, and the bright light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter all the time.
It is indeed.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Of course, we all know Dr. Raywat Deonandan, epidemiologist, science communicator at the Great University of Ottawa. 1019.